I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. You rarely win, but sometimes you do. Miss DuBose won, all 98 pounds of her. According to reviews, she died beholden to nothing and nobody. She was the bravest person I ever knew. In this passage, Atticus speaks to Jem about Miss DuBose. First of all, this passage is significant because it includes character revelation within Miss DuBose and shows who she really is as a person through Atticus's words. Atticus explains to Jem that she was very courageous in trying to fight her addiction to morphine. The quote, "It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway and you see it through no matter what," tells us that Miss DuBose didn't give up on refraining herself from morphine. She knew that it would be the right thing to do and was successful because she died drug-free. Second of all, this passage demonstrates symbolism. Miss DuBose symbolizes courage because in society, courage appears to be a man with a gun. That may be right in Maycomb due to their opinion and morals, but it is not correct. Miss DuBose is the correct meaning of courage, despite what society thinks, because her courageous actions took real compassion and could be backed up with facts. Lastly, this passage contains paradox because Atticus says that a man with a gun isn't courage, but Miss DuBose, a sick lady, is courage. This may appear false, but in reality holds a great deal of truth. That is why this passage is significant, and that is why it displays right versus correct. "Democracy," she said. "Does anybody have a definition?" "Us," somebody said. I raised my hand, remembering an old campaign slogan Atticus had once told me about. "What do you think it means, Jean Louise?" "Equal rights for all, special privileges for none," I quoted. "Very good, Jean Louise, very good." Miss Gates smiled. Then Miss Gates said, "That's the difference between America and Germany. We are a democracy, and Germany is a dictatorship." "Dictatorship," she said. "Over here we don't believe in persecuting anybody. Persecuting comes from people who are prejudiced." "Prejudice," she enunciated carefully. "There are no better people in the world than the Jews, and why Hitler doesn't think so is a mystery to me." This passage is significant because Miss Gates tells her class that Maycomb isn't prejudiced. This shows irony in the sense that Miss Gates is hypocritical. Maycomb may not have prejudice against the Jews, but they are prejudiced against African Americans. The people in Maycomb believe that the way they are treating the African Americans is right. They don't see it as prejudice because they were raised and grew up looking down on the African Americans. Miss Gates says, "Over here, we don't believe in persecuting anybody. Persecution comes from people who are prejudiced." And that is exactly who they are. The correct side to this is that Maycomb is similar to Hitler in the sense that they discriminate against another race. This is correct because within the book, there are many facts that prove all the racism that occurs. Second of all, it shows character revelation in Miss Gates, because when she says, "There are no better people in the world than the Jews," it shows that she favors them. This may be why she sees Hitler's actions as prejudice. In Maycomb's case, she doesn't realize the prejudice because she doesn't like African Americans, therefore making her oblivious to her hypocritical statement. Lastly, it shows background information on the way Scout was raised because she knew the meaning of a democracy. She impresses the teacher by quoting an old campaign slogan that Atticus had told her about. That is why this passage is significant.
The picture is a mother holding her child. The narrator of the story is a child. The picture represents the importance of children in the story. They are still growing and with their minds always subject to the influence of their parents. Everything that their parents say will therefore be a part of the children's conscience and become their right. But that is not correct. The parents are not always correct, and what they think is right will change their child's idea. The children in the story show how differently their parents have raised them, and seeing the story from a child's eye shows the ability for the children to be persuaded to change their right from their adults around them. The picture is a black man and a white man with their faces together. On each side of the face there is their background. This picture shows the theme of right versus correct by saying how everyone is the same and is only their background separating them. The image behind each side of the faces shows their background. The white face has a city behind them, showing the urban influence he has. The black face has a farm behind him, showing the rural influence. This shows how each were raised and how their ideals may be different, but they're actually really all the same. Both of the pictures show the right versus correct influences. Right is what you were raised to think, and correct is what is definite. The first picture shows the growth of his child by their parents and how they each teach them in their own ways. The quote, "No, everybody's gotta learn, nobody's born knowing," shows how everyone starts off as a clean slate and everything around you is an influence, like your parents. However, because everyone is a clean slate, their background is what causes racism. In the second picture, there is a white and black face put together with their background behind them. This shows that they are both the same and only their background is different. Like Scout says, "They're just one kind of folks. But why is it our backgrounds that separate us? If there's just one kind of folks, why can't they all get along with each other? If they're all alike, why do they all go out of their way to despise each other?" Which is said by Jem. For example, Mr. Cunningham and Tom Robinson are both farmers. Both are somewhat poor, and the only difference is that they're black and white. Although they have similar backgrounds, how they were raised creates their inability to get along. Mr. Cunningham was grown to think that blacks were always bad. If Mr. Cunningham was raised like the Finches and wasn't racist, then his opinions would be different. The only way to lose racism is to remove our backgrounds and change our rights to become a mutual correct. I think this is the lesson Harper Lee was trying to say.